Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who is trying to calm her relationship anxiety. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
No, we are not professionals. We are not trained in this in any way whatsoever.
Sure.
We are only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love.
All right, let's get right into our letter. So this letter comes from Anxious and Afraid, whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing from the void. Hey, Sam and Sierra. First off, this podcast has given me so much perspective and comfort, and I am truly grateful for the insight that both of you generously provide. I, she, her, age 27, struggle with childhood trauma resulting in relationship anxiety and anxious attachment in both romantic and platonic partnerships. I hope to get some perspective on my emotions and experiences and any advice for navigating them. For context, I grew up in a home where my mother displayed emotional volatility and inconsistency, leaving our house every time she was upset, while my father was emotionally unavailable and complacent. I was always blamed by my parents for their fights and expected to clean up the mess. This upbringing has made me hypervigilant in social interactions and personal relationships, trapping me in a negative mental feedback loop where I blame myself for others' negative emotions and hold myself personally responsible for fixing it. Although medication has helped, I still feel self-conscious and emotionally stunted in my ability to communicate effectively and prioritize my own emotions and needs. While therapy has provided an emotional outlet, I am yet to find helpful ways to overcome the anxiety I feel and prioritize my individual happiness. The reason I'm finally writing this letter is because I'm currently in a loving relationship with my partner. Let's call him Z, he, him, age 27. Z is kind, supportive, empathetic, and is such an amazing communicator. So good, it's to the point where this relationship in particular has made me painfully aware of how behind I feel in my own communication abilities, as well as my ability to compassionately and empathetically navigate conflict. And yet, my admiration towards him and my appreciation of this relationship has encouraged me to work towards being so much better about how I treat others and myself. Z and I also share similar experiences with our partners and friends, so this understanding allows us to be warm and compassionate toward each other in ways that others may not comprehend. However, our similarities also sometimes trigger each other. We both notice the minor changes in each other's moods, me more than him, but I most fear losing Z due to previous relationships that I've lost and strained family relationships. While my brain can recognize that most of those connections did not end solely because of me, my heart still blames myself. Critiques from past relationships include, it's hard to express my feelings because you take it personally, even when it's not a big deal. And why do you constantly ask if I'm okay? Just trust me. My current partner has lovingly made similar observations, and although he understands, I worry that I annoy him and will push him away when I repeatedly ask about his well-being or become tearfully frustrated during conflicts. I don't like that I act this way, as it exhausts us both. I struggle to break free from it and simply trust that those who love me simply just do, conflict or not. I don't want to sound like a martyr, invalidate others, or dismiss their feedback. I want to be able to focus on myself and make myself happy despite how others might be feeling that day. I want to feel secure in myself and not waste an entire day feeling anxious because someone might be mad or upset with me. I want my partner and friends to always feel comfortable talking to me, and I want to make them feel heard and validated. I often felt the opposite of this growing up, so I'm bummed that I have made and currently make others feel this way too. Can this be healed while simultaneously maintaining healthy romantic and platonic relationships? I am exhausted from feeling constant anxiety over situations that often lack a basis in reality, i.e., my friend texted me okay instead of something more lengthy, so I guess they hate me today, LOL. Obviously, I can't control others' actions, and if someone wants to leave, they'll prioritize their well-being. But why can't I internalize this? Why can't I believe it when someone assures me they'll stay? And why can't I accept criticism without overwhelming anxiety? I recognize how these patterns negatively impact my relationships, and I genuinely want to overcome them and find new ways to navigate my relationships. Thank you for taking the time to read this message. Whether or not you share it, it felt incredibly cathartic to get it out of my system. I genuinely appreciate all that you do.
Oh, my darling. Thank you so much for writing and trusting us with this letter. It is truly an honor to respond to it. And we got to take like a quick break in a second, but I just want to start by this revelation that I had listening to your letter being read to me by Mr. Sam Blackwell. There's no perfect brain out there. Did you know that? That like, there aren't other people that are born with brains that function at this perfect level that we think. You know, I was listening to you read the line that why can't I do this? Why can't I receive criticism and react in this way?
For sure.
Like, because we don't come out of the womb perfect. And if we do, then we're fucked up by our parental relationships, by our early relationships, by our own, neurology, by our hormones, by the things that happen to us. Like I relate so deeply to this letter, and I can't wait to dive into it. But I just had this epiphany out there of like, we say, why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? Not realizing that everybody else can't do this either. And everybody else has different coping mechanisms or different connections or different neural pathways that, like, does that make sense? Can you help me say that in a more articulate way before we go to the commercial break?
No, I think you said it perfectly. Yeah. And I think what I like about this letter is that it is really relatable for me too, right? Like, that like Sierra and I have like very different attachment styles, and we have different approaches to relationships. And also I have been the one that asks the person that I'm with if they're fine too many times, right? I have been the one who's tried to like cling and say like, yes, I'm scared you're going to leave, or the opposite, which is that like, you're going to leave anyway. So I will just like remove myself from the situation, yes. I think that what you're speaking to here is not necessarily like, oh my God, you're so fucked up and like, why can't you do this? It's like, what a human experience that we are all having in the ways in which we are trying so desperately to be in relationship with each other and have so few models, have been damaged so much by our families of origin or communities of origin, right? Like intentionally or not, right? Like I'm not trying to throw anyone's parents under the bus, but like there's lots of different ways why we come to this space and say like, I don't know what to do, right? I only have this tool and it's definitely not working here. And it's not, I think it's so funny that we have this idea that like everyone should be so perfect and that like we're uniquely messed up, when in reality, like so few of us are offered tools to help us actually manage meaningful relationships well. And then we get blamed when we don't have the tools. Like we blame ourselves and other people blame us, right? Like, why are you doing it this way? Like, and it's like, because we're all learning and we've all been given very poor tools from the models that we've had and the places that we've been. Like, it is even the people whose like parents have been like psychologists, like often like come write us and are still like, my parents are psychologists. Why don't I understand this? Right. Like we are all so bad at navigating relationships, understandably. And then we get mad at ourselves when it's like, I'm reaching for a tool and there isn't one, or I'm using a tool and it's not working. And like, yeah, of course.
Because the subtext was, why can't I do this when other people can?
We can't.
But it's like, we can't. We have, everybody has different tools. Everybody has different, lived experiences. And I'm just trying to erase. It's almost the sentence structure that I'm trying to push against, or the underlying foundational idea, which is that like my brain is broken or my way of loving is broken, and that there's an unbroken brain out there that I need to get to.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That other people have access to. That's not the way we need to think about it. It's like, okay, well, what am I working with? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my fears? What's my capacity? What level of resiliency do I have? How hard can I work? And how do I want to show up in this next season of my life, instead of what's wrong with me? Why am I not this perfect person,
absolutely.
this perfect self.
Absolutely.
That all being said, literally everything you do in this, everything you mention in this letter, I've done. I feel so deeply connected to it. And like what I just said, the piece of advice that I led with is like it's the revelation that I had just listening to you. But everything you said was so relatable. We're going to get into more about that in just a minute.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm still thinking about what Sierra talked about around like we all have these imperfect brains and hearts that we're walking around with, and this expectation that many of us have of like, how do I will my heart and brain into perfection, instead of saying, oh, of course my heart and brain are imperfect. What sort of accommodations do I need to make to help live in the reality of that imperfection? What sort of scaffolding do I need, given the fact that I, like everyone else in the entire world, have an imperfect heart and an imperfect brain? And like the idea that we can just will ourselves into it is not actually serving us super well.
Not at all. It's like an extension of self-harm to me, is that it's the least compassionate way to, push yourself towards growth.
For sure.
And guess what? That it never fucking works.
Absolutely.
If you bully yourself, if you blame yourself for who you are because of how life created you, it's like, who's at fault here? I mean, honestly, like, if we're going to point fingers, let's point fingers at parents, and then we're going to point fingers at their parents, and then, like down the generational line. But, your parents had imperfect brains and hearts like you do. And this judgment of other people's love, it's almost like you're taking their love and you're putting it through like an X-ray machine. You're checking it for holes, and you're checking it for weapons. You're checking it for risks. This hypervigilance, you're doing it because you're trying to protect yourself, because you have been taught by your upbringing that love is dangerous. It's volatile. It's performative. It's something you have to do in order to earn peace and stability. And even then they could leave. And I think the first step not the first steps. You're already on this journey. One of the steps is truly sitting with the idea that this anxious attachment style, this reaction, this hypervigilance is not a bad thing. It's not a fucked up thing about you. It's not this broken burden that you bring to relationships. It is a survival tool, and it is an act of great love and affection towards yourself. It is a tool just like any other tool.
Yep.
It is the tool you were given. It is the tool you built for yourself because you needed it to survive in a volatile, inconsistent child-parent relationship.
For sure.
And I know it might feel backwards, but like, how can you and I, my darling letter writer, look at our anxious attachment styles and say, this isn't a burden, it's a gift. This isn't a burden, it's a gift. I am not a burden. I am a gift. And the way I love isn't broken. It is just the way I learned to love. Right? Because as soon as you start saying, thank you for, this protective mechanism. Thank you for trying to take care of me, to yourself. That is the path of self-love. And only then can you really start allowing other people to be like as flawed and as complex as you are. You can alleviate them and yourself of the responsibility of loving you perfectly, because you're no longer in this state of fear and defensiveness and reactionary, but instead gratitude, presentness, and great compassion for yourself. I'm trying to protect myself. And in that clarity, in that peace of like, no, thank you, anxiety. Thank you, anxiety. Once you no longer get into when you're out of the fight or flight mode, the fight mode really, then you can say, am I truly at risk here? Am I truly at risk? What is it that my anxiety is responding to? And we can maybe answer a little bit more level-headedly or clearly or whatever that is,
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's only through practice that I've been able to develop tools that aren't hypervigilance, right? Like, and I deeply relate to your letter because I also had a parent who was emotionally volatile and like left the house a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And another parent who was doing her best and also like trying to navigate this. And because of that was kind of withholding emotionally because of the emotional volatility of my dad, right? Like I deeply understand that. And I also grew up with a lot of hypervigilance, right? Like I was the person that could make people calm down. I was the person who could take care of other people and say like, I still do this with my family all the time, which is like deflect with humor. Like this is what I have been trained to do. And it works in my family of origin. It keeps people safe. And it doesn't work in my romantic relationship. Like it does not work in my marriage. And so I still have those feelings of like, I got to do this. I got to be hypervigilant. I got to make people feel better. Like that is my job. And if I'm not, then people are in danger. Cause like I was in danger, right? My family relationships were in danger in those moments, but that's not, I'm taking a lens that isn't actually true and applying it to something where that lens doesn't fit. It's not actually what's going on. So the only way that I have been able to deal with that is by really trying different things and committing to try it, right? Like the first step is for sure Sierra being like, how do we get out of the fight and flight? Which is like, I'm safe, right? This isn't what I'm thinking is happening isn't actually happening. Like my lovely little heart is lying to me about what's going on here. But then the second thing is like trying different things in response to what's going on, right? So my response for a long time was just like constantly checking in. Like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you sure that you're okay? Yeah. Is everything wrong? Is there anything that you need me to do? How can I be helpful? Right? Like just again, those like incessant questions. And so then I had to try some other things. One of the things is to say, is instead of asking, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Instead saying, how are you feeling? And is there anything that you need from me? Right? And then walking away or like going and doing something else or whatever it might be, removing myself from the situation. Sometimes it is just sort of noticing and saying out loud some of the things I'm noticing about Peter's behavior, right? Like I'm noticing that you're kind of like agitated or you're really quiet. Like, is there stuff going on with you? And asking the question that way and then believing the answer, right? Like trying to say like, okay, he's telling me this. I'm going to remember this. I'm going to hold that. And when I want to ask that question again, instead I'm going to say to myself, he told me that I'm okay. And if he's not okay, it's not my fault, right? Like there are things that I've had to learn to develop for myself because this mindset of hypervigilance of like constantly being afraid that something is going to go wrong hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there, right? It is still the primary way that I encounter the world. But I have developed these different ways of trying that have said like, okay, when I notice this is happening, we're going to off ramp into something different because going down this path isn't helpful.
Yeah.
Through lots of different ways, through evidence of this, how this has shown up in my life. And so we're going to off ramp. We're going to do something else. We're going to try a different thing. And reminding myself that like my job isn't necessarily to make those feelings go away. My job is to notice them and then say, all right, but we're not going to do the thing that we've tried before over and over that hasn't worked. We're going to try something else in this moment. We're going to pick a different option.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I love that fucking off-ramp metaphor. I always have. But I just had this epiphany that like, when we say that, we don't mean that like Sam beautifully exited that off-ramp. He probably like caused like a car accident and like swerved and then like drove into the next city because he didn't actually get off the off ramp, right? Yeah. Like when we say you have the opportunity to do something differently, we mean over the next 6,000 to 9,000 months of your lives.
Yeah.
You know, like it is, especially for these sort of trained responses or these tools that we carved out for survival based on our homes of origin or relationships, you know, are these foundational relationships. Like, it is going to be uncomfortable and you are not going to succeed the first dozen times you try to implement these new tools.
Yep.
Like, I've been reading so much about how anxious attachment styles are attached to your nervous system, and how a huge piece of dealing with my anxious attachment style for me has been recognizing that it's okay for me to feel physically uncomfortable. That, like, if my adrenaline is spiked, if I think Willow is mad at me for no reason, say she came into the house and didn't make eye contact, how dare she?
What a nightmare.
And all of a sudden I'm
what
thinking,
a huge
like,
monster.
yeah. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh my God, she's mad at me because I was on my phone in front of the baby, or, you know, like all of these crazy narratives that I'm superimposing on my life to make me feel safe, to make me feel like I know what's going on,
Yep.
you know, to be super vigilant to all of the shit that's going on. Instead of immediately reacting and saying, what's wrong? What did I do? Or responding in whatever way my anxiety wants me to respond, I have to sit in that physically heightened space of like, something might be wrong. She might be disappointed with me. She could, you know, whatever. And I swear to God, if you sit in that physicality and you move around and you say like, okay, body, I'm going to let you be uncomfortable without reacting mentally, that physical discomfort becomes less over time. Like at first it'll take you 20 minutes to become de-escalated physically. Then it'll take you 15, 10. You know, I think I can talk myself out of an anxious attachment spiral in 3 minutes now physically, because because I've practiced getting on that off ramp so many times. But I mean, there were like car accidents beforehand.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
Absolutely.
I had to MapQuest my way back to my body a couple times. Like, those off ramps are not immediate fixers. It's practice. It's practice. It's practice. I also want to say, like, your anxiety, your anxious attachment, your story of origin from your parents, you know, have told you a lot of patterns. They've said, if a person is upset, it is going to be volatile. If a person is disappointed or emotional, they're going to leave. Emotions are unsafe, basically, is what your childhood has taught you. Despondency is unsafe. It's disappointing, you know, all of these things. Those stories are, I need you to say this out loud with me, like repeat it after me. Like, just because it has been true in the past doesn't mean it's true all the time. These are not rules of the universe. You know, the universe isn't operating under the rules that your household taught you because of your parents' wounds.
Absolutely.
Right?
And all of that stuff happened and was real. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like so often we're like, oh, why am I so fucked up? And it's like, yeah, because in your house, any disagreement led to emotional volatility. So, like, of course, that's the outcome that you would expect. Like, what else could you have possibly learned? And like, you didn't make that up. You didn't just like conjure this attachment out of thin air. It was taught to you. It was given to you. And from very real circumstances where you had to keep yourself safe in what was a very unhealthy space, in a place that could have been dangerous in a lot of different ways. And you did successfully by doing the things that you are now struggling with when it comes to your relationship.
Right. Off topic, on topic, sort of aside. I also agree. All of my shit came out when I was in a healthy relationship. That's not an unusual thing. I think all of a sudden my anxious attachment style didn't have like an infidelity to hide behind, or a fucking, you know, my partner wasn't addicted to drugs or whatever. Like, there wasn't a bigger crisis that my anxious attachment style could hide behind. You know, all of a sudden you're in a stable, loving relationship, and this shit is going to come out, and that's okay. That's it. We all have it. We literally all have it. And just keeping in mind, like, you know, I was thinking the other day that, like, because of our anniversary, I've been thinking a lot about perspective and stuff. And we get glimpses of people. We get glimpses of you all in your letters. Willow and I went to a party the other day, And we came home and I was thinking like, those people only got a glimpse of our lives. Like they know us, but they don't know us at all. They don't know, and from the outside, our relationship looks really happy and healthy. And thank God it is. But but I'm saying like, it's just healthy, happy relationships require this untangling constantly all the time, this is just not abnormal. I think this is happening in all relationships, hopefully.
I think so.
In one way or another. It's coming out one way or another. Yeah.
And I also just want to remind you that it is okay to need validation from your partner.
Yeah.
Right? The goal isn't to say like you are perfectly fine by yourself. It's okay to need to say things to him about what your experience is and get some love back, right? It's okay to ask for support. It's okay for you to check in on him, right? Like all of those things are okay. And I recognize that you're like in a place where you feel like you're doing it too much, and like absolutely can totally understand that is a something that may be unhealthy about the way that you're interacting. And I don't want the pendulum to swing the other direction, because there are so many ways in which my anxiety can be quelled by a loving embrace from Peter, right? Like by him telling me that he's okay, by me saying, you're giving me this criticism and I hear what you're saying out loud, but what I'm hearing in my body is this thing. Can you just say that this thing isn't true so that I can move on to what you're actually telling me, right? These are conversations that we have with each other because we know that we are in relationship, and so we are interdependent, and it's okay for us to have give and take around what we need from each other. It's okay for one of us to overextend themselves for a day because the other person needs it, right? And we can then take care of each other in different ways. It like all of this stuff is about the messiness of relationships, and that is beautiful and wonderful, and where relationships should be, right? It's not like two perfectly healthy, never done anything bad, never going through any shit people. It's like, yeah, constantly going through shit, constantly needing each other, constantly maybe asking for too much and like figuring out where the boundary is. Like that's the commitment to figuring it out, I think, is what breeds more healthy relationships than the idea that somehow we're going to be perfectly healed people that come into relationship perfectly ready to never make a mistake with each other.
Yeah, exactly. I have like 1,000 other thoughts because like anxious attachment styles are just they're real, man. Like I've been talking about mine for like the last couple of weeks because it's still so present in me. And I say that to say like it's something that I'm always working on because it is the way my brain is wired, basically. Mm-hmm. So you have to learn how to love it and nurture it and accommodate it and at the same time be on those outskirts of change all the time, practicing being uncomfortable, practicing what does it actually feel like to practice believing your partner, believing that they are not going to leave you, that they are okay, that if you leave them to take care of themselves, how will that feel? Mm-hmm. Get used to those feelings. Sure. For me, it was so much of getting used to those feelings. If you take anything from this, it's a journey. This is life's work, but there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a burden. You are just working with the tools that you have, like everyone else is. And they just happen to be very relatable tools to Sam and I.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. We hope this helps.
Thank you so much for writing. We love you.
All right. This brings us to the blind date segment of this episode. Every week, we like to shout out something that we love that we want to set you up with. And this week, we are sending you home with
a TV show called The Bear, which is on Hulu. And the second season just came out or is like in the process of coming out. I'm not quite sure. I love the show. It's about a restaurant in Chicago where the brother of the owner of the restaurant like went out and became like a very famous chef, and then his brother dies and he has to come back and help sort of run the restaurant. His brother leaves it to him. And it is so wonderful. It's just about people trying their best and trying to be in relationship with each other in a meaningful way. It's got a lot of the themes that we talk about on the show in terms of like how to be kind to each other. There's grief involved. There's mental health stuff that comes out. And, you know, I think it's just one of the best written and like most beautifully made shows that I've seen in a while. The second season is like fantastic. I think it might even be better than the first season. And just like, it has all of the things that I love in a TV show, which is like a Midwestern city and people who are like trying really hard and failing sometimes, but then also like holding each other when that failure erupts. And I just think it's really beautiful and very well done, and can't recommend it enough.
Spoiler, I shouted it out last year on Blind Date. So this is a twofer.
Yeah,
this is The Bear season 2.
Season 2, yeah, absolutely.
I was going to interrupt you, and I was like, no, I'll just give it to him.
No.
Just let you have it.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, so specifically season 2. Season 1, I know you've all already done, but come back to it and enjoy the second season because it is very good. There's like one episode in particular where I just was like, this show is really doing something.
So good. Yeah.
Check it out.
I have a huge crush on that main actor too.
Yeah. He's
some
cute.
Hot energy going on there. Okay.
All right, everyone.
It's not the yelling, it's the grungy tattoos and hair.
Yeah, his tattoos are like, I'm like, what is that? What is that? Did you do that yourself?
I want him to chop me up and fry me.
Okay.
I want to say yes, chef. Do you know what I'm saying?
They do say yes, chef. A lot on that show. All right,
okay,
everyone.
Anyway.
Thank you so much for listening. You can, if you are interested in more content from us, or if you're interested in our episodes without ads, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode as well as ad-free episodes. That is patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need 2 random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his music and podcasts. And remember that hypervigilance that you learned as a child or a young person or in your relationships where you feel like you need to be so incredibly tuned in to the emotional needs and moods of other people, that is a gift. It is a gift and a tool of survival that you learned. And sometimes we outgrow these gifts. Sometimes we need to make new tools. First, accept it, and then decide to set it down. And if all else fails,
just break up.